Hello and welcome to the End of Dieting webinar. My name is Sarah Klein, which hopefully I know many of you on the call. And I want to thank you so much for joining us, or joining myself. I'm used to doing this with Karen. But thank you so much for joining tonight. It's my pleasure to have you. So I'm just going to wait a couple moments before we really get into the juice of our talk. But as you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a chat bar. And I love to get a good conversation going on these webinars. So please be active in the chat. Once I go over to my slides, I won't be able to see the chat, but you guys can all have a great conversation. And then after I come back from the slides, I'll be able to see the chat. So feel free to ask any questions along the way in that. And you guys can talk amongst yourselves. So make sure you have a pen and paper handy. So if you want to take some notes, you can record some tidbits, hopefully that you'll learn along the way. And also we're going to do a little experiment. So you're going to want a pen and paper for that. So in the chat, please say hi and tell me, or tell all of us, where you're calling from. I'd love to hear where you're calling from. And if we know each other personally, let me know how we know each other. And then I always like to start these with kind of a fun question so we can all get to know one another. This is one of my absolute favorite questions to ask people. I think that it gives you a little insight into personality. And some of you I have maybe already asked this before. So if you had the choice, would you choose to teleport or fly? Now, there's a couple ground rules here. If you were able to fly, it would be at a bird's-like pace. You can't be Superman, Superwoman here. You're not flying at jet speed. Teleport, you would pretty much wiggle your nose like the genie and boom, you'd be wherever you are. I'll go ahead and answer first, but please share in the chat if you'd like to teleport or fly. So I'm absolutely a teleporter. I've thought about this a lot. The idea of flying sounds fantastic, but the idea of teleporting, I can't pass up. The idea of being able to have lunch in Italy and then an afternoon hike in the Amazon, or to be able to go see my family back east whenever I want. I mean, it's a no-brainer for me. So share in the chat, would you teleport or fly? All right, so we are going to get started. The end of dieting. This is one of my favorite topics. And again, keep that chat active. Ask any questions, and you guys can all talk amongst yourself. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get started on my slides. So I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so I unfortunately cannot see the chat at this point, but hopefully you guys can all see my screen. And again, we are talking about the end of dieting today. Why extremism has never worked out, but balance and a good relationship to your body and food does. All right, so many of you probably know me, and many of you may know me well, but again, my name is Sarah Klein. I'm owner of Whole Health Lab, and I'm an integrative nutritionist and yoga instructor. My passion for food goes way back. I'm a true Italian at heart, I would say. I have always been one to enjoy the many beauties and pleasures of food. My husband always makes fun of me and says that I'm quote unquote food focused, where I'll be at one meal enjoying and already talking about the next. Or he'll say things like, I have quote unquote food stress because when we travel, I always have to make sure I have a couple extra pounds in my suitcase filled with delicious and healthy treats so that I always know I'll have good options at hand. So, one of the many reasons I decided to start studying nutrition was that I have always been interested in the psychology of food and the psychology of health. And actually, my undergrad is in health psychology. So, I've always been interested in understanding why we do what we do when we know what we know. Um, and if I could figure that out, I'd probably be able to solve a lot of the world's problems. But I'll get back to you on that one. So I have watched many family members and many of my good friends in this struggle with health and the relationship to food. It almost seems like in our culture, it's a rite of passage. The yo yo dieting, the guilt with meals, the constant ups and downs with our pounds, our relationship to food, and of course, all woven in with complex emotions. So observing these patterns has really kind of driven me into the work that I do today. Now, now don't get me wrong, I have not had, I've surely had my own struggles myself in trying to find balance between overeating and definitely in my college days, over drinking. However, I've always been an athlete, so I was able to hide away kind of any imbalances that were occurring because you couldn't see them necessarily from the outside. However, they definitely manifested internally. And all growing up and really until my mid 20s, I suffered from crippling migraines. And it took me a lot of work and a lot of self study to figure out how to balance and eventually rid those. And in college, in one of my health psychology classes, I started to track the correlation between my diet, my exercise habits, and my stress levels. And I was able to pinpoint within a 3-day mark when I would have a migraine. Now, that was the first point of knowledge and awareness, but it took many years to start to implement what I knew and turn it into new healthy behaviors before I was able to truly rid those. But the magic recipe for me was whole, real foods, hydration, exercise, and meditation. So, also, many of you that know me well know that I'm totally addicted to yoga. And if you follow me on social media at all, you also know that I'm addicted to yoga. I have absolutely drinking the Kool-Aid. And a matter of fact, I will be serving it up to anyone who will try it. The practice of yoga teaches us to connect and observe to our inner experiences. So this quickly led into my passion for food. And before I knew it, mindfulness, which happens for many people, my mindfulness was starting to bleed into the kitchen, into the dinner table, and into the grocery store. And this is the heart of my work, connecting yoga and eating. So I am a true believer that food is one of the finest pleasures of life. I mean, take a moment and think about it. Not many other mammals enjoy, actually, I don't think any other mammals enjoy the food the way that we do, with the different diversities of tastes that we experience, all the textures. And it's a full experience. And I'll talk about this more later, but digestion starts at the nose. So food is full of emotions, it's full of culture, it's full of social and pleasures. And if you've attended any other lectures, I always try to make the argument that I believe that food is actually an expression of love as well. So kind of to tie this all around into, why I'm so passionate about this topic um, of the decline of dieting or the end of dieting is that when our diet is off balance, our health suffers. And when our health is suffering, it takes an edge off of our greatness. Food, weight, appearance, appearance, excuse me, etc., start to stand in the way of the things that really matter in life. So things like our family, our relationships, our career, education, hobbies, our social life, those are all the things that give life that zest. And those are the things that truly fuel us in life. So when we have our health in balance, we are able to tune into the things that really matter. And that's kind of the base and the underlining message of this lecture is to kind of get our health in check so that we don't have to continue to worry about it and we can focus on the bigger things. So let's dive in. We have lots of content to cover, and I'm really excited to go through it with you. So again, thank you so much for being a part of this call, and I hope that you keep that chat active. All right, so who here has been on a diet? And I know everybody's hand can raise because I think everybody can identify with this. So in the chat, I'd love you to share one of the funkiest diets that you've been on. I always find this super interesting, like the tangerine diet or the jello diet or something along those lines. So if you've had an experience of being on a really interesting diet, go ahead and share that in the chat. All right, so it's important to first recognize when we talk about this subject that there's a lot working against us. There's a billion-dollar industry out there telling us what to eat, when to eat it, how to eat it, and how to feel. There's millions of dietary theories, and there's a whole lot of confusion. So here's some interesting stats to kind of bulk up the idea of why dieting should end. So the whole health organization stated that 39% of adults ages 18 years or over are overweight in 2014. We know all these statistics, but it's always important to refresh and kind of fine tune. 95% of diets fail, and most will regain their weight within 1 to 5 years. Now, there's some different approaches in the research to look at that. So UCLA research states that most people on diets regain all of the weight plus a little. Dr. Hyman, who is a big mover and shaker in the wellness world, he's a functional medicine practitioner in the US, he states that the average person on a diet will gain 11 pounds for every diet they go on. And the reason is that we lose muscle and fat, and then we tend to just gain back the fat, and that totally throws a wrench in our tire regarding our metabolism. The Boston Medical Center indicated that approximately, this is crazy, 45 billion Americans, or excuse me, I read that wrong. It's not that crazy. 45 million Americans diet each year. That's a lot. US weight loss market revenues total nearly 60 million in 2014. That's a lot of money. And 8 out of 10 dieters try and lose their weight on their own without any support system. So that's a big key, and we're going to talk more about that. So go ahead, share in a chat. What funky diets have you been on? Love to hear. All right, so we're going to start this lecture by talking about the 5 ways we tend to self-sabotage ourselves around eating habits and diets. And then we're going to talk about 10 of my favorite tips to creating balance and get off the track of dieting and kind of get into the world of creating balance and a healthy lifestyle. So these 5 are the top 5 that I would come up with, but we could add to this list. And if there's anything that I didn't say, please share it in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. All right, first one, we think it's all about willpower. So when we think it's all about willpower, we turn on this cycle of negative talk because therefore it's us and our lack of ability. However, our biology is set up and is a finely tuned machine, and evolution has produced it to be this perfect. So, starvation and deprivation don't work because our biology doesn't want it to. When we go into starvation mode, red flags go off and it actually shuts down our metabolism and starts to hold fat so that we can survive. And it's a really beautiful mechanism when you think about it, especially when we were in the hunting and gathering stage of humanity. So we need to get out of the idea that it's willpower that creates this change. So not only does it not work because of our biology, but we're just constantly self-sabotaging ourselves with this negative talk. And the way that we talk to ourselves should be the way that we talk to someone we admire dearly, someone we love and look up to, right? Because the way that we treat ourselves is so important for our health, and our inner health is just as important as our outer health. So stop relying on willpower, let that go, and instead we're going to start to implement tips and tricks to fill up in a health and fulfilling way, so you don't even have to worry about willpower. You can take that factor totally out of it. So we want to eat foods that prevent our cravings. And along this idea of willpower is we tend to think that cravings are a bad thing. However, cravings are our body telling us something. And again, our body is such a finely tuned machine that when it's telling us something, it's very important to listen. It knows what it's talking about. So we want to start to look at cravings as callings for health. And a lot of times our cravings have many meanings, and I could go ahead and do a whole lecture on that. But here's just a couple tips. So for me, when I'm craving sugar, I actually just need more protein. Or sometimes when I'm craving sugar, it could be a lack of hydration. So our body doesn't know, our brain, I should say, doesn't know if we're hungry or thirsty most of the times unless we're really, really thirsty. So if you're having a craving and you might not necessarily need to eat, it's important to take a full glass of water, wait anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes, and then check in. If you're still hungry, go ahead and eat something because you probably need something. But hydration can be a very powerful substitute for a lot of cravings that we face. Another great one is with sugar cravings. So there could be, why, again, I said the protein thing, but there could be another aspect, and we might need some of that sweetness. And sweet vegetables are a great thing to turn to when we are finding that we're having a lot of sugar cravings, because that could satisfy that sweet need that we desire. And we're going to talk more about crowding on it a bit, but the idea is to stack in those sweet veggies. So root vegetables are a great example of sweet vegetables, like sweet potatoes, beets, carrots, turnips, butternut squash, spaghetti squash. All of those have a little bit of a higher sweet taste. If we start to stack those in, we might be able to crowd out or curb our sugar cravings. And don't just take my word for this or really anything I say here. I truly encourage you to try it and notice how it works for you. All right, next way that we self-sabotage, and this is huge. Food deprivation and extreme diets do not work. A matter of fact, they have equal to greater than backlash, and those statistics that I just shared with you prove it. So we want to have discipline around our food, of course, but we more importantly want to have flexibility. I like the rule of 90% of the time, do your best. However, 10% of the time, indulge. And we're going to talk more about indulging in a little bit. But this deprivation and extremism creates a game around our food. It's almost like having the carrot out in front of you that you're constantly chasing and can never get. And when we feel like, the more you take something away from somebody, the more they want it. And then when they get it, the more they're going to eat it or do it, right? We all know that. It's human behavior. With deprivation and extremism, it's important to tune into that it's not necessarily how we look. And I know that, this could be a whole lecture in itself, but it's how we feel. So it's important to start to get into the way that your food makes you feel. So measures of energy, sleep patterns, those are far better ways to judge your health than a scale. And kind of to further that, we want to be real about our goals, right? We don't all, none of it, we can't all be supermodels, right? And if you're ever having that feeling, I think it's important to watch a YouTube video of airbrushing of supermodels. It's an illusion. It's not real. It's important to factor in your body type and your size when you're making goals around diet and weight and the way that you want to look. All right. So another way that we self-sabotage is we focus on calories. Now, there's a lot of new science emerging that calories in, calories out is actually not working because all calories are not created equal. And here's how I can back up this argument. So say that you were to sit down and eat a whole, bag of chips, right? We have probably all done that once or twice, and we were able to do it. However, what if somebody asked you to sit down and eat a whole butternut squash or a whole bundle of apples? It would be really, really tough. And this is because junk food has has no nutrients, fiber, and vitamins. So the way that our digestive system works with it is very different than the way that we digest whole foods. So when we're digesting whole foods, we're satisfying our needs, and the body says, boop, I'm done, I'm over. However, junk food spikes our sugar, and it essentially throws our blood sugar onto a bit of a roller coaster. It goes really high and then really low, and it stores the rest of the unused energy as fat. So it's basically empty calories. All right, because I like to kind of think of junk food as quote unquote dead food. I know that that's a little bit of an extreme term, but it doesn't have energy. It doesn't feed us. And we're going to go more into that in a bit. But food is information, right? So there's this food feedback loop. And we want to start to switch our thinking around that and think of our cravings as a calling for health. Now, another thing when we're talking about calories is fat is our friend. And in the last 20 years, fat was demonized as being bad. However, emerging research is showing that we need fat for our health, and fat actually doesn't make us fat. And saturated fat is really important for the health of our brain. So low-fat foods and the whole low-fat food movement took the fat through a form of processing out of our foods. And because when we took the fat out, it took the flavor out. So food marketers or food industry people put sugar in. So when you're looking at fat-free foods, you want to be really mindful about the amount of sugar, because sugar, the way that it's burned, ultimately, if it's not used, it is stored as fat. So they can be interchangeably. interchangeably. So healthy fats and incorporating healthy fats into your diet is really important. And healthy fats would be like avocados, nuts, nut butters, olive oil, um, coconut oil, coconut meat, coconut milk. All those healthy fats are really, really, really good for you. They help to make you feel full. They're great for your body. So it's really important to kind of switch the way that we think about these things. And then the whole idea of counting at the dinner table, that is just not fun, right? Counting this, counting that, adding it all up, and correlating all these numbers. So that whole idea, I am a firm believer of staying far away from. All right, next tip. It works for a friend, so it must work for me, right? Now, I want you to take a moment and think of one thing that you eat that works well for your body, but somebody that you know can't eat. And as you think about that, please share that in the chat. I'd love to hear. And I'll give you some examples. So a great example is dairy. Some people do really, really well on dairy, and some people, it affects their skin and it can break them out. Coffee is another good example. Some people get really, really anxious and feel terrible on coffee, and some people do fine on coffee. So this is the idea of bioindividuality, and it's the base of the school that I studied in, and I think it's a really important aspect to nutrition. What works for one person does not necessarily work for the other. The way that we digest food is different. Our systems are different for a lot of different reasons. And then another aspect about this is when we go to social gatherings, how often are people talking about the diet that they're on or that this works for their friend? It's rather daunting, right? And then again, it plays into that food psychology and the mental chitter chatter around food. So taking the focus off of food when you're around your friends and your family, don't talk about the latest diet, right? Talk about something that will fill you up more. So there's some interesting research that supports bioindividuality. And it just recently came out. This Israeli researchers who are writing for the journal called Cell found that different people's bodies respond to eating the same meal very differently, which means that a diet may work for one person and do wonders. However, their best friend may have very different impacts. All right, next way that we self-sabotage. We take the all or nothing approach. And I feel like we can probably all agree to this one. And we can even bleed it into exercise. If I don't have a whole hour to do my full yoga practice or a full hour and a half, I'm not going to do anything at all. Or if I can't get to the gym and do, my full workout, I'm not going to do anything at all. Or how about things like this? Oh, I'm going to start this quote unquote diet after the weekend, or I'm going to start it after the holidays, or next year is my year. So when diets are too strict, it leads to binging, right? We want to make small, sustainable steps over a long period of time. Sustainable steps that we can implement and keep in our lifestyle. This is kind of the inpatient approach where we're all in or we're all out. We want to focus on other things. And this is definitely temporarily versus long-term change right here when we're all in or all out. Okay. So then this is kind of more in the food psychology realm, and I think it's really important to put in. When we're kind of struggling with food habits, we want to think, what are we really hungry for, right? So the average American eats 10 to 30% more than they need to satisfy their hunger. And that extra percentage usually is satisfying some kind of psychology, right? Some kind of comfort. Now, it's important to recognize that there is a laundry list of reasons why we might want to go for a diet or fine tune our eating habits. And there's almost too many to name, but some, for example, would be, oh, I want to, lose the baby weight, or feelings of boredom at work or at home, relationships issues, grief, stress, stopping smoking, loneliness, or loss. So it's really important to be honest about what is the underlining issue of what we're really hungry for. And if it's a bigger issue, it's important to get the help that's appropriate, right? Reach out when needed. Food habits and emotions are totally connected. And our life circumstances are linked to our food habits. So then primary food, this is a huge part of my coaching and the work that I do. It's also a big part of the school that I studied in. And it's actually one of the underlining reasons why I decided to study in that school. So primary food, go ahead, share in the chat if you heard of the theory of primary food. So basically the theory of primary food means that this wheel that you see here is your primary food. Secondary food is all the food that you eat. And the idea is it's called primary for a reason, because these are the things that really fill us up in life. So things like our social life, our career, our physical activity, our hobbies, creativity, spirituality. And this wheel can look different according to different people's lifestyles. But the idea is to take the focus off of the food. And also, when we have these things that really matter in life in balance, the food starts to balance itself. So I want you to take a moment and think about a day where you were very busy. However, it was a good busy. It was a feeling of fulfillment, motivation, and drive. Now, I want you to recall if you may have skipped a meal that day. And I'm not saying to skip a meal, and I'll talk more about this later. That's something that I do not agree with. But the purpose of this scenario here is that when life is full, we don't necessarily reach for the food to sub it out. So when we're really motivated and connected and mindful, right? The food habits just seem to happen. So food for thought. So now let's talk about what does work. So first, let's define what a diet is. And there's actually two definitions. The second definition that comes up is a special course of food to which one restricts oneself, either to lose weight or for medical reasons. Now, again, this is called the end of dieting, and the word restrict is in diet. So how I coach and really how I live is along the clean eating spectrum. So the idea of clean eating is to stay as close to quote unquote clean foods as much as possible. So clean eating is not a diet. It's not deprivation. It's not restriction, but it's balance and it's knowledgeable choices. So if you think of the spectrum, on one side, you have your super, super clean foods, and those would be things that look the exact same way they did when they came out of the ground, right? So a carrot, tomato, apples, bananas, etc. You get the idea. It's the things that don't have labels, right? They don't have food ingredients because they are the ingredient. And then on the other spectrum is quote unquote very unclean foods, or sometimes I call them dirty foods, although that's not very nice. But those are highly processed, artificial junk foods, right? So those would be like your Doritos, your nachos. It's something that if you held it in front of you, you would have no idea how it got out of the earth. And better yet, if you read its ingredients, it would have a huge laundry list of ingredients, and many of the ingredients you wouldn't be able to pronounce or picture, right? So, why I love this approach so much is because it's a spectrum. No day looks the same. And we do our best every day to stay as close to the clean eating side versus the dirty side. All right. And again, that 90-20 rule, 90% of the time, do your best, or excuse me, 90-10. 90% of the time, do your best, 10% of the time, live, right? Indulging is part of life. So, the clean eating movement started in the 60s with the development of processed foods. And it started for moral reasons as processed foods were starting to be marketed. Now, the clean eating movement is very individualistic. So it's very bio individuality, which I love, meaning it means something different for everybody. Right? You'll have clean eaters who are vegan, clean eaters who are gluten-free, eaters who are vegetarian or paleo. You know, it's what works for you. However, everybody a part of the clean movement does agree that processed foods are out of the movement, out of the quote unquote diet. So clean eating revolves around maintaining balance. It's a personalized diet of fresh, unprocessed foods, including fruits, vegetables, whole grains, some meats and fish, healthy fats, and some dairy if dairy works for you. So after kind of talking about that, I want to do a little exercise. And just, to respect time, um, I'll introduce the exercise. I'll give you a couple minutes to get it started and then feel free to finish it later. So I want you to take a moment with your pen and paper and write down everything you've eaten today. Everything that's gone down the hatch. Now, this is a very powerful exercise, and whenever I start working with people, I encourage them to write down everything they eat. If you're looking to make food habit changes or lose weight, this is your trick. Keep a little journal with you, and every time you eat something, write it down. Just doing that for a week or two can have a lot of clarity and insight into your food behaviors. It also allows you to start to notice and recognize your triggers and your quote unquote offenders. And then you can start to build habits around that. So when you finish writing everything down that you have eaten today, I want you to put a star next to the things that do not come with an ingredient list. Again, those super clean foods. So that would be carrots, brown rice, spinach, all of the things that look the way that they came out of the earth. Put stars next to them. Then your next thing you're going to do is I want you to circle all of the things that have under 4 ingredients. And if you were to read the ingredient list, you would be able to picture what those ingredients are. So that would be a good healthy bar, maybe one with 4 ingredients or less. It could be your cheese. And then last, I want you to draw a line across anything that you ate that had over 4 ingredients and at least 1 ingredient that you didn't know what it was or couldn't pronounce it. And then this is a great thing to implement, and I encourage you to take this home with you. Carry around a little journal, write down everything you eat, and then see how clean of a diet you have, right? Our memories can trick us. Our memories can be subjective. They do a lot of research, and our memories aren't always very accurate. So writing it down in the moment can be really powerful and an implementer for change. All right. So I love this. You are what you eat, right? Your food becomes you. Your food you assimilate. It becomes your blood. It becomes your hair, your nails, your skin. It becomes your mood. right? So you are what you eat truly on a cellular level. So don't be cheap, fast, easy, or fake. All right, what is clean eating? We have pretty much covered that, I think. If you have any questions, share them in the chat. I'm happy to go deeper on that. Okay, so we're going to go through our top tips for balancing a diet, or excuse me, tips for balance diet free lifestyle. And some of these we've kind of already covered, so we'll go through them at a good pace so we can fit it all in. I want to make sure we have time for Q&A at the end. All right, so crowd out. Don't turn to a diet, keep focusing on adding in. That's a quote from Hunger for Change, which is a great documentary about food. We already talked about the sweet veggies. It's quality over calories here, right? Truly, we can only eat so much in a day. So if we start stacking in the good things, naturally, the not so good things will start to blend away. Our stomach is only as big as our fist when it's not full of food, right? So we really can't fit that much in there. And adding in the good things versus focusing on deprivation is always a healthier change. So, something I work with a lot of clients, maybe somebody who is trying to cut back on coffee, for example, I'll have them before their morning coffee just add in a glass of water, right? That way, we're not taking anything away from you. We're not depriving, we're not putting the carrot out in front of you to chase, but instead, we're just adding in a glass of water. And then before you know it, you might just drink half of that cup of coffee. You can do that for a variety of things. Before you have your meal, just add in some greens. Make sure that there is a pile of greens on each one of your plates. All right, make small sustainable changes over a long period of time, right? What's the rush? Change doesn't happen overnight. So, this is where the idea of extremism doesn't work. If when we try extremism, yes, it might work for a little bit, but then we rebound back. Our statistics show us that. So, small, sustainable changes that fit your lifestyle. It's important to celebrate your wins, no matter how small they are, and develop new habits, right? So, implementing 1 to 3 things every 2 weeks is the trick that I use in most of my programs. When you have a laundry list of things to change and try to do it all at once, it probably won't work. So, just a couple changes at a time. Okay, read your labels. This is huge. I think we are trained to look at calories, to look at fat, maybe we even look at fiber or sugar, maybe protein. Now, that's all good and great. However, I think that reading your ingredients is far more important. Now, the way the ingredients are listed is about quantity. So your first ingredient has the most in it. So if your first 2 to 3 ingredients include sugar, it's probably something that you want to steer clear of. And it's really important to get sugar savvy because they hide sugar in the ingredients list very well. So you got to kind of do your research on sugar, um, hidden additives in your ingredient list, and that could be a whole lecture in itself. So again, better yet, buy foods that don't have a label list. Whole real foods. Make it a habit of turning over your labels and reading them. Try to stick to, under 5 ingredients. Don't focus on the calorie and fat. Again, fat is our friend, and all calories are not created equal. Avoid chemicals, avoid artificial sweeteners and flavors. Those tend to deplete our hormones. All right, connect food and mood, and this is another topic that I truly love talking about, and I think I could do a whole lecture on in itself. We already touched on the food diary, and when I have clients start food diaries, I have them not only track what they eat, but how they feel after it. And to kind of, prove that food and mood are connected, do you feel different after you have a cup of coffee? Do you feel different after you have loads of sugar? Do you feel different if you ate a salad or if you ate steak and potatoes, right? Our food and moods are absolutely connected. So, starting to tune into them and then judging our health not by the scale, but about the quality of our energy and the quality of our moods. And once we start to make these correlations, we start to become motivated from a more intrinsic place, right? We want to eat well to feed our body so we feel good, so we can focus on the things that really matter in life. And then again, that idea that food is information, or our cravings are information, our body's a feedback loop. Mindful eating, this is one of my favorite topics. So, first, we need to get a clear look at what we're eating, right? And that's where the food diary comes in so handy in the tracking. And then, second, the way that we show up around our food impacts the way that we digest our food. So, our digestion actually starts when we smell our food. Smelling food gets the digestive enzymes in our saliva moving. Then, the process of chewing is the first step to digestion and a very, very, very important one. Not only do the digestive enzymes have time to attack the food and break it down, but also the chomping breaks it down into smaller pieces. So when we're shoveling and not mindfully eating, we're asking our digestive system to break down further down the track bigger hunks of food, which therefore take a toll on the amount of absorption of vital nutrients and minerals and phytonutrients, but also take a toll on the effectiveness of our digestive system. So it's important to show up mindfully when we eat, right? Start to connect with, where did our food come from, right? How was it raised and prepared? Can we find gratitude for our food? Can we slow down when eating? Take the focus off of the food and enjoy the company that we're with, right? Stay away from eating in your car, eating standing up, eating walking, right? Let your meal be a, if you practice yoga or you practice mindfulness, a practice of mindfulness. It's really important to take a big, deep breath. Just one breath before you eat will dramatically impact your digestive system. All right, stress less. Stress impacts the way that we burn fuel. And this is one of my favorite topics. Again, all these I love. I love these topics. And I could do a whole lecture on this. But to keep it short and concise, is when we're in our sympathetic nervous systems, we have our fight and flight response, and we have our rest and digest response. When we are in our fight and flight response, our body only burns sugar because it needs a quick burning fuel. However, when we're in our rest and digest system, our body's able to burn fat and burn our slower fuel because it knows that you're safe and relaxed and it doesn't need to kind of be on alert. So, taking time out to practice mindfulness, connect with your breath, slow down can actually impact the way that we hold, maintain, gain, and lose weight. It's a very fine tuned magical system, really. It's amazing how it works. And the more that we know around it and the more that we kind of provide it with what it needs, the more it works for us. Movement is key, right? A great tip is to get a calendar and start recording your exercises, as it can be very motivational. And we want to start small and create sustainability around this. So if you're not going to the gym or not having exercise in your life right now, think about things like taking the stairs versus the elevator, getting off a stop earlier on the train, walking around the block after dinner. We tend to exercise, I think, 20 to 30% more, better, if you will, when we exercise in groups. So grab a friend, take a class, get into those motivational settings. I work from home, so sometimes when I need a little break, I'll just run up and down the stairs 3 times. And it's a great way to just add in more movement. So instead of having the all or nothing, just think adding in wherever you can. Be prepared. Meal planning is everything. So we want to make sure, and this is going to go along with another tip, I'm going to combine them right here, is stabilizing our blood sugar. So when we have the highs and lows of blood sugar, that's when we start to make bad decisions. So we want to stabilize our blood sugar levels so we get off of the roller coaster ride. So we want to be mindful of how much sugar, white carbohydrates, caffeine, processed foods, sugary drinks we're consuming, because those all send our blood sugar levels through the roof and on this roller coaster ride, which then we're just constantly trying to catch up with. So with that, we want to make sure that we have healthy snacks available. And this is probably why my husband calls me the food stressor, because I always have the healthy snacks. So being prepared, preparing your food, a great tip is when you get home from the grocery store, schedule an extra 10 minutes, wash and chop your vegetables, put them in prepackaged containers, and then when you go to the fridge, it's a quick decision. Or if you have to grab something to go, it's a quick decision. All right, enjoy. And this is probably the number one thing. When we put guilt into food, we get on this roller coaster ride. So we want to practice food forgiveness. So the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology showed that people who have an attitude of forgiveness and self-compassion after one setback, so one big indulgence, one splurge, they are less likely to give up and go on a binge and keep eating. So if you lose control with a dish, like a chocolate cake or whatever it may be, you haven't, quote unquote, blown it. So just practice a bit of self-compassion and forgiveness, and you can get right back on track, right? And then further with this, I like to think bite for pleasure, eat for nutrition. So let your meals be nutrient dense, whole, clean foods. But indulge and don't hesitate to indulge. And when you indulge, think bites, right? And what we tend to do is when we are indulging, we tie so much guilt around it that we're actually not mindfully eating. So because we're not mindfully eating and really enjoying and satisfying ourselves, we overeat that indulgence. So whatever it takes, maybe a breath before it, maybe closing the eyes, really enjoy and savor. And then the satisfaction will go up and the overeating will go down. Right? Because nobody is going to tell me to stop eating dark chocolate. I can promise you that. I always have a bar in the fridge, right? It's all about balance. And then stabilize our blood sugar. Try not to get hungry. We definitely just talked about that. All right, so get support. This is huge. We try to do it on our own. 8 out of 10 dieters try to lose weight on their own without any support system. Join a community, enlist a buddy, have a plan, think long-term versus short-term, and then set up your environment for success, right? So clean out the fridge, get your triggers out of the kitchen. Don't buy the triggers or buy them and truly indulge and enjoy them when you do. So with that, I want to introduce our clean eating challenge, or better yet, it's called a Clean Living Challenge. And I'm doing this with Karen from Real Energy Foods, and we are super excited about this. And we've been working hard developing the content, and the content is coming along beautifully. So I'm just going to quickly introduce this. And then because you stayed with us and stayed on this call, which we're so great, I'm so grateful for your time and your ear. And with that, we're going to offer you a great special discount for this challenge. So essentially, this clean eating challenge has 3 pillars. Clean eating, whole foods, real foods. That's your first pillar. Then reflection, both on what we're eating and how it makes us feel and how we digest it, but also reflection as the form of meditation. So starting to take care of the space between our eyebrows. And then movement. All right, so why are we so passionate about clean eating and clean eating? Well, first and foremost, it's absolutely the way that I like to live, the way that I like to coach. I've had great success, and I've seen many people have great success with it. But benefits of clean eating absolutely increase energy, weight loss, clearer focus and awareness. It's not deprivation, it's more of a lifestyle, so more sustainable changes. And then in this, so, as I already talked about, why do we do what we do when we know what we know? And the best answer I have for that is lack of support and accountability. So signing up for a challenge like this, you'll have 2 health coaches, and there's a bunch of accountability aspects and support aspects that are integrated into the program. So you'll have peer support, you'll have one-on-one support, and that's really how we like to load up our programs is education, knowledge is power, but then what is the tipping point to change? And we believe that's support and accountability. So rejuvenate 30-day clean eating challenge. And then, you can hear me talk all day, and first and foremost, I always encourage people to not necessarily just believe what I say, but try it out for yourself. That's the key to bioindividuality. You'll know best. And then when we're talking about our programs, here's some of our testimonials from some of our past programs. I love how Molly said, she basically talks about balance in her testimonial, how she feels increased energy levels. She's enjoying cooking more, but it's not, she's still indulging, which is important, and it's all about balance. And we have Allie, who kind of was in a tough spot when she started the program. And this is kind of the proof of primary food, right? Let's get our primary food and talk about primary food alongside with nutrition. And then Shannon, and here's what she had to say about our last program, about the support and the accountability and kind of the coursework as well. So we appreciate all those testimonials, and it's helpful for you guys to kind of learn what it's like working with us. All right, so here's your extra special discount for the hour of your time, which I very much so appreciate. So this program is usually $97, and there's a link in the chat, and it's actually the first thing that I posted in the chat. So if you scroll all the way up, you'll be able to click on that link, and you'll get 50% off of this Clean Living Challenge. And it's also a time-sensitive link. So this discount will only be available for 24 hours. So if you have any questions about the program, please don't hesitate to reach out. My email is wholehealthlab@gmail.com. My website is wholehealthlab.com. So it's easy to find me. Please reach out. I'd love to answer any of your questions. And then I'd like to go into a quick Q&A here and see if you guys have any questions. So I'm gonna go back and come back live, get back on the call. All right, hello. Great. It looks like we've had a good conversation happening here. So again, I am so grateful for your time, and I really, really appreciate you being on this call. And let's see, feel free to post up your questions in the chat, and now that I can read them, I can answer them live. If you're daring enough, I'd love to see your face. So you can raise your hand. There's an option to request to speak. So if you'd like to raise your hand and then you can ask it live, that would be really fun. We'd love to see your face, but don't feel like you have to. So I'll give it a couple minutes and see if anyone has any questions. Oh, I see a no link. Let me post that up. There's your link. Do you guys see that link? And then also, just so you know, you're going to get an email tomorrow morning with this recording as well as that link. So great, Shannon got the link now. Thanks, Sarah. Awesome. Thank you, Shannon, for answering. So any questions? I don't think so. All right. Well, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. I so appreciate you being on this call, and I hope, if you're in Colorado on Mountain Time, you're about to enjoy a beautiful, clean dinner, or if you're east, then maybe you're getting ready for bed. So sleep tight, and thank you again. Take care.